Welcome to Tenant Spin Studio. Would you like to take a seat?
It's a way of bringing people together who would never meet.
It provides the potential for ordinary people to make important comments about the things which affect them and not leave it to the professionals and the technocrats. Their lives forward.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Tenant Spin Wednesday broadcast.
Before we start today's show, I would just like to talk about a HAT resident, Olga Bailey, who was heavily involved in this project and died a week and a half ago. Olga worked with the HAT for 10 years, was very involved in the Tenant Spin project and loved this project. We'd like to dedicate today's show to the memory of Olga. She'll be sadly missed, but always remembered. Thank you. Olga always wanted everyone to be positive, and today is the official celebration of Liverpool having achieved capital of culture status for Europe in 2008. And we are very, very pleased to be able to be part of the celebrations that are officially starting today, I believe. Both Liverpool High Rise Tenants Group, Liverpool HAT Residents, Liverpool HAT and FACT have really put everything behind the bid as much as we could, and just congratulations to everyone who was involved in actually securing City of Culture status. If you don't live in Liverpool, then you better move here, because the next 5 years are going to be totally amazing, really, and 2007 is the 800th anniversary of the city, so it really is quite an exciting time to be living here. On a personal level, I was thinking of actually moving out of Liverpool, and obviously can't now, so there go my plans. This is going out live on the internet, and also we think it might be going out live on BBC Radio Merseyside. So as Davina McCall would say, we are live, please do not swear. I've always wanted to say that. The first discussion we're going to talk about is holistic regeneration. Liverpool, I think, as anyone who lives here knows, is seeing so much change happening, both in the city centre and across the city, that we want to explore today how communities are involved in that regeneration process. And also to what extent regeneration should go outside of the whole issue of bricks and mortar and actually into things like community facilities, economic development, care and support for people. And I want to explore, we want to explore those issues in today's broadcast. My name's Paul Kelly, I'm chairing the first discussion today, and I would like to introduce my panel of people who've come in to discuss these issues. If I could start from my right, if I could ask you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Karl Smith. I work for Plus Housing Group. I'm part of a business unit within that organisation called Engage, and I run a project on another part of that organisation called Include Neighbourhood Regeneration Company, and I provide community regeneration services to the people in the Dingle and the Granby area of Liverpool.
Thank you, Karl. Welcome. Next we have Lynn.
Yes, good afternoon. My name's Lynn Greenwood. I'm a resident board member for Arena Housing Association.
Thank you, Lynn. Welcome. Thirdly, we have Liz.
Thank you, Paul. My name's Liz Gill. I'm from the Government Office for the North West. I'm based in the Liverpool office. I'm responsible for that part of government policy which is called the National Strategy for Neighbourhood Renewal, which is all about narrowing the gap between our most deprived communities and the rest of the country.
And last but no means least.
Yes, and I get the ice cream cone. Hi, I'm Josie Crawford. I'm actually the Liverpool Housing Action Trust rep, and I'm a tenant as well from Shield Park.
Okay, welcome everybody. We want to keep today quite informal. So we will start some discussions. We've also got people watching online, so we might bring in their questions. And also, if anyone here has any questions they would like to throw into the debate, please put your hand up so that we can get a camera and a microphone to you, and we will try and involve you in the discussions. And let's see where we go. This is the 200th show that Tenant Spin has done, and every show we do is archived almost immediately, permanently on the website. So in a year's time, or maybe in 2008, January the 1st, we can actually re-show this show to actually see what state the city's in 5 years' time. And I think that's one of the most exciting things about this whole Tenant Spin project. So I will start the discussion, and I'm going to start with Liz, if that's okay. Somebody from Government Office here. Obviously, the city is seeing so much regeneration going on. There's so much money actually being pumped into the city. What, in Government Office terms, how do you see things are changing in terms of involving communities from maybe 5, 10 years ago? Right. A big question.
Well, I'd like to think we've seen a very big change. We've seen a big shift in government policy from 1997 onwards, I think. I mean, I think it's fair to say, you know, Merseyside has had a lot of regeneration initiatives, almost since regeneration first started. Merseyside has benefited from whatever was going back to urban programme, through city challenges, single regeneration budget, and so on. And you can still see the physical change that came out of, for example, city challenges, which were relatively well funded. Some of the later SRB schemes perhaps less well funded. But I think what was lacking, and I actually did deal with some of those schemes, was fundamental community involvement. There was some tokenism, but I don't think it really stretched very far. And I think the expectation from government now is that actually, you know, it is much more, you know, right down to street level, that people, you know, are getting involved and are having a say about what is happening. Now, I know that's patchy at the moment. It doesn't necessarily happen across the piece, and some of the other people here and you in the audience will probably say something about that. But that's the expectation. But I think it's not just about saying community involvement is a good thing, so we will do it and full stop, that's it. Because people, you know, can be consulted and they get fed up with being consulted. If, you know, they say consulted to death. So it's actually about having some structure to it, having a purpose to it, and setting some parameters, if you like, around not just what you like in your neighbourhood, but, you know, here's what we do at the moment, here's what the budget is. Are there things that we might do differently that would actually benefit people more? So it's having a real and honest debate about things rather than just a consultation that comes up with wish lists.
And just building on that a bit, what strengths do you think that brings to the regeneration process or the end product?
Well, I think it brings a sense of ownership. It's about feeling that, you know, residents are actually part of it and doing something, rather than being done to. But it's also, I think, bringing in some common sense sometimes. You can have, you know, regeneration specialists and service providers who are specialists in their own field, but they're not on the receiving end all the time, and they don't actually see necessarily what happens with the end results. So I think, you know, it's important that the people on the receiving end actually, you know, have their say and say, well, look, you know, have you thought about doing something in a different way? Because it doesn't quite work the way you're doing it. So it's that common sense that comes into play as well.
One of the issues that was kind of raised when we put together this whole pamphlet was that actually, and it's quite a tough issue really. One of the questions that one of our residents came up with was, is the term regeneration simply a rebranding of all that didn't work in the past? Mm-hmm. The quote being, same suits, same staff, same attitudes. Is that fair?
I think it's fair in the sense that we have to work with what we've got to some extent, don't we? So big organisations, statutory service providers, local authorities, the police, the health service and so on, they don't change overnight, do they? And the people that work in those organisations are there for a reason. They're there because they've become specialists in a particular service. And I think part of what the National Strategy for Neighbourhood Renewal is trying to do through its learning and skills element is actually reach out to all the people who are frontline workers and say, you need to adopt a new skill set, which is around, you know, how you actually engage effectively with residents and get views out of residents in the most effective way. And not all of us in statutory organisations have got those skills, and sometimes organisations are going to have to look at where they get the skills from if they haven't got them in the people there already. So you play to the strengths. You've got people who are good at providing services and doing the finance or whatever. Maybe you need other people alongside rather than just changing the people you've got. But I think there has to be a mix and match approach to that.
Right. I'm going to now bring in Josie here. And I'm going to now look at the other angle, because I think building on what Liz says, as a worker I would say this maybe, but I certainly see things are changing out there. But actually the communities are kind of quite frustrated in terms of expectations are maybe too high, or that things can change overnight. And actually some of these, as we know with Liverpool Housing Action Trust, we're 10 years into the programme. Olive Mount Heights, if there's anyone here, we went on site on Monday. I mean, just extraordinary. That project's happening, but it's taken 10 years. And our community's impatient.
No. No, I honestly think, there's a lot of people in the last 10 years who started, the Housing Action Trust. I mean, can I just correct something? And I said I was a rep Liverpool Housing Action Trust. I am not. Liverpool High Rise Tenant Group. Thank you very much. Okay. But I think just going back, we initially were spoken to in 1991, and there's a lot of us in this room listening outside who are still listening and active and still participating was, the buzzword in them days. But as far as being impatient, no chance, because we're still here, and there's still a lot of work to be done.
Does community activism then maybe, thinking again about the hat, the actual fight to get the hat set up then becomes different when you're actually implementing the project? And do communities have to change when they're actually, the fight to get the money at the hat had happened, then it was working in partnership with us to deliver it. Does that bring about change in community politics? And
well, I can only speak, on a personal level, because other people can speak for themselves. Initially, I think, before the Housing Action Trust came on board, if you like, there was pockets of people. I can only speak for Liverpool. You had pockets of people who had residents associations, and they had the structure, but I never had a clue, because I didn't know who they were. So it was for me, it was like a learning curve from day one, going on to committees and finding out who was who and what's what, and it was absolutely mind-blowing, because we're not stupid, far from us in Liverpool or anywhere in this country, I think. For us to sit alongside of chief executives and, all set, I don't know, Mike's on bus, but never mind. I think for us to sit alongside of board members in the hierarchy and getting people from London talking to us, it was an absolute learning curve. And I think prior to that, I'm sure the local residents associations had their own remit about what they were doing in their own communities, but the Housing Action Trust stuff was on a much, much wider scale, and our own people learned as we went along. We've all got the lip, so we decided, well, whatever you throw at us, we can answer you back, and, I'm sure it's the same even in Warrington.
It is, yes.
We've progressed greatly, I think, residents' movement, no matter how small it looks. I think people themselves today, their expectations are higher. But also, I think, we're more approachable, and forgive me for saying this, but, for myself, I always think it was sort of union-minded people who got involved with not just your little local resident associations, but the big, the tenants federations and all that. And, it was I always remember, standing orders and sit down, don't speak, blah, blah, blah. Oh my God. All we wanted to do was to get over what we wanted and what we expected, and the involvement of our own residents in knowing what they want, know what they were asking for, rather than saying, there's a bag of money there, just get it, and see what happens afterwards.
So with the high-rise tenant group, do you think you got over the kind of rules and regulations and standing orders and into, you moved over that, you're saying, and into actually delivering?
Definitely, yeah, because, initially it was like the resident-led structure. You know, even yourself may not be sitting here only for the residents.
Absolutely.
Because we started saying, well, this is what we wanted. It was a voice that was being able to be heard, and it went from your local residents association and built up to this, you know, big forum of the high-rise tenant group, which was quite big. You know, in the early days there was like over 100 people, you know, used to come along representing, you know, quite a few thousand people as well. So I think, you know, from there, the structure itself, it was like an educational thing, and it was a build-up, and this is what we were doing, and this is what we want, you know. So the structures came hand in hand, you know, with the shadow board, because we had a shadow board before we actually voted to go into the Housing Action Trust.
Can I bring in Karl from CDS Housing? I don't know if you could explain how CDS have changed, but I'm also interested in this notion of, you know, housing providers used to be about providing quality housing for people. Now you're doing a whole... So how has that changed in the last few years for yourselves?
I mean, I suppose in some sense, CDS has always had a tradition. If you look over the history of CDS, of having strong links with the community development agenda, I suppose. Originally, CDS started out as a supporter of the cooperative movement in Liverpool, one of the pioneers. In terms of the way that things are changing, CDS, like a lot of ourselves, are beginning to realise that as organisations, they also need to change as well. I think that there's acknowledgement, and there's a clear understanding that we're not really just housing providers. We're actually operating in an environment where, as stakeholders, we have, in a lot of areas, the biggest investment. So therefore, we don't only have an interest in the housing that we provide in the area, we also have an interest in all of the other services that are provided within that area. In terms of the way that we've changed to begin to address that, when we set up sort of like what we call a group structure, and now CDS Housing is part of the Plus Housing Group, which is the parent company, and hanging below the parent company along with CDS Housing, there are a couple of other organisations, one called Include Neighbourhood Regeneration, which I mentioned before, another one called Hornby Homes. And in some sense, I mean, in setting up the group structure, CDS Housing now is able to re-rationalise the way that it actually organises itself and provides services. And what I forgot to mention before, within that structure, there are some specialist units as well. There's a sort of like physical development specialist unit. There's a community development specialist unit, which I'm a part of. There's a marketing specialist unit. And I think, as I was saying, by re-rationalising itself, or by the organisation reorganising itself, it's now able to respond more effectively to a much more diverse range of demands and issues that arise out of the neighbourhoods that we provide primarily housing services for. But we can now respond to issues around education. We can respond to issues around safer neighbourhoods. We can respond to issues around health and social regeneration. We may not be responding directly as a direct provider of some of them other services, but I think that we have a role as an enabler to basically facilitate, along with the community, you know, sort of like the fulfilment of issues that may arise, let's say if it's health and social regeneration or if it's safer neighbourhoods. I think as a key stakeholder within neighbourhoods, you know, we have a leading role to play to actually facilitate all them agencies coming together to actually address common issues.
Right. Okay, thanks for that. I'd now like to come to Lynn, and it's great that Lynn's here, tenant board member with Arena Housing, and I think you were saying before you were a resident of Grosvenor Housing, and then...
Yes.
So can you explain how Grosvenor became Arena?
Well, there was Grosvenor, what we call the East, and Liver, which was mainly based in Liverpool there, and the two merged together, and Arena was formed, and we've not looked back.
Right.
It's onward and upward.
So how's that experience been for you in terms of being a tenant board member within a housing association that has emerged from...
Well, when I became a resident the housing association, I wasn't aware of the opportunities that residents do have now. And through Arena Housing Association, we feel that they are listening to the residents, and they do value our opinion, which is great.
So what sort of things, from your perspective as somebody living in Arena property, what sort of things do they get involved with?
We have, with the merge, we wanted to get the best out of the two sides, if you like, of policies, and created Arena's policies, which the residents got heavily involved in. I myself was on various different policy groups, and along with the Arena staff, we got the policies up and going. And there were issues in there that, you know, the greatest of people, if you're not a resident, you don't think of things, just the basic things or everyday things that seem trivial, but on an everyday basis, you know, they are life-changing.
Can you give an example?
Well, I suffer with arthritis, and I know I'm only young, but I've suffered over 10 years with arthritis, and for me the Arena adaptations policy is fantastic. Complete, like you say, just to turn a tap.
Right.
It's nothing, is it? But it is if you've got arthritis. You know.
You felt you were able to impact on that policy as it was being.
That's right, and my knowledge as a disabled resident is of value to people who haven't got disabilities.
Right.
You know, and I can see things from a disabled person's viewpoint that other people just don't contemplate at all because they're not in that situation.
What about this whole issue? The next show is going to go on to it in a lot more detail. Maybe we'll start round the table again, but or the sofa. This whole issue of at what point should housing associations or housing providers stop being involved? And just as an example, Liverpool Housing Action Trust have worked on this project with FACT and with some artists, Superflex based in Denmark, to develop this project. And it's kind of doesn't fit in any box. It's not helping somebody in their property particularly. You know, they're not getting their roof repaired or whatever. Should this be something that housing providers are doing? Liz?
Well, if they had unlimited funds, yes. I mean, you know, it's a great thing to do, isn't it? And it has all sorts of spin-offs that are really difficult to quantify. And I think this is where, you know, some sort of good ideas sometimes fall between the cracks because, you know, government always wants its outputs and its outcomes for its money. And where you've got something that's quite difficult to capture in that way, then you know, sometimes it doesn't get a very easy ride funding-wise. And it's, you know, it's nice to think that an organisation like the Hat could actually, you know, could say, yes, we can do this. It's probably not a huge amount of money at the end of the day. And housing associations obviously do have reserves, you know, to some extent, and can do that at the margins. But I think to think that they can, you know, they can start becoming providers of other services in a major way is perhaps the wrong way of cracking it, and we should be getting the other service providers to play their part alongside those registered social landlords, those housing associations, so that they're working in partnership, they're talking to each other. The housing association as landlord is saying, here's what our tenants are telling us, because they've got that direct route, haven't they, into the tenants. They're getting that feedback. They can then say to the service provider, whoever that might be, look, we really need you to do this, whatever it is, in response to what our tenants are saying. And it would be nice to think that they can get the right response. Sometimes I think, you know, housing associations perhaps do have to get bigger to have more clout. So a merger means you've got a bigger organisation, it's got that bit more clout. Sometimes it's about keeping things, as CDS have done, they've gone into a group structure. So they've got some small organisations that keep things small, but they're also part of a bigger group that again has got that clout and has got different arms. It's got presumably profit-making arms that can do different things to the bits that are non-profit making. So it's all about changing, I think, to meet the circumstances, but getting those main service providers to deliver what is needed on the ground at the same time.
Does anyone else have any views on that?
just an extension really of, I mean, what's already been said. I think that housing associations, they have an initial role in a lot of cases to actually instigate and innovate. And, you know, I mean, I know that sort of like I'm engaged in a lot of work which traditionally wouldn't fall under the housing sort of like remit. I'm involved in a healthy living centre project, and I'm very, you know, a lot of my time and other members of my team, you know, we've invested quite a lot of time in that particular project. But I wouldn't actually see that as a long-term commitment. I would actually see our role as being instrumental in actually developing the idea, helping the community or partners identify the resources, set up the project if appropriate, get the project up and running. And then I think that gradually, you know, the housing association, you know, we start taking a step back because there are better qualified people to actually develop that service, manage that service and take that service where it needs to go. I think that we've actually fulfilled our role then, and then we move on to something else. So we kind of like have this kind of like, I think, a role around instigating, around, you know, seizing opportunities within our neighbourhoods, because we're often best placed to know where they are, because we have a continued presence in them neighbourhoods and a large investment in them neighbourhoods as well.
I think that housing associations nowadays, they're not just landlords. I mean, they are building the community spirit, and they do value, as I say, the build-up of the community. You know, a happy resident is going to make their life easier as well. And, you know, hopefully. But I mean, it's not just bricks and mortar, it goes beyond the front door.
Right.
With community initiatives, we have Arena Housing has a grant that's offered to residents for things that go beyond the bricks and mortar and the maintenance and everything.
Right.
But I was just going to say, I think, excuse me, for Karl, you know, saying like that, you've done your best as far as like the healthy living side, you know, that type of stuff, and then whatever you sort out there, then you back off a bit. I think it's like a rolling programme, you know, because you've got like young people, like Lynn's saying, who've got arthritis, you know, they're your people of tomorrow. So I think where if you just go on about the housing rather than holistic approach, which, okay, you know, like you say about the holistic approach, I prefer that to just the housing, you know, because as you said, you know, tenants are happy, well, you might be happy, but I think it's also down to your frontline staff as well. Yeah. Like Liz was saying, there's a form of training, you know, if you go back a few years ago, you had like housing officers, you know, not without being disrespectful to them. People were just numbers, really, you know, they had a house number, but you know, these people have been in the houses like 40 odd years, and if you asked a housing officer, you know, given that, say if it's the council, they have thousands of properties, you know, registered social landlords, they have X amount of properties, the smaller ones are emerging, but the bigger ones, they have X amount of properties, but it's the property and not the ones within. Yeah. So I think, you know, if there's this holistic approach to whether it be healthy living, it means happier residents. You know, that's part and parcel. And we also have statutory bodies who have a duty through social services, etc. But I think your frontline staff are the most important, where rather than just think about the housing, get to know the people and know their needs as well. And that thereby there's the structure, because not everyone has got a tenants association, not everyone has got that structure. So I think that you can lead on that. Yeah.
The key factor is communication.
Oh,
definitely. I mean, you can knock all barriers down with constant communication.
I mean, kind of building on that, that's one of the things that, and I would say this, wouldn't I, because I work for the Hat and I'm the community development manager, but one of the real things I think the Hat have done so successfully is actually get behind people's doors. When the Hat was set up 10 years ago, if anyone knows some of the tower blocks, some of them were just in the most totally horrendous state, without question. And what we spent a lot of time very early on doing was getting behind people's doors, because people didn't even know neighbours. People didn't, you know, I think of Childwell very clearly about people didn't even know each other in the block. And suddenly they were getting letters saying, come and be involved in picking your architects in your regeneration programme. I kind of think, actually, you know, a few coffee mornings and a few day trips and, you know, but we've got a chief exec who's, you know, he's got to keep account of the public money. Yes. Does the human side sometimes get lost? Does it get lost in CDS?
It can do. I mean, I take the point that you're making, Josie. I mean, like I'm sort of a community regeneration or community development manager working within the Plus Group structure. And the principles behind community regeneration, community development are already won over with me. Yes. Because that's my central job. I mean, that's what I'm employed to do, to actually, you know, try and increase satisfaction, you know, to the people in our neighbourhoods. But I think you're right. I mean, to some degree, part of the issue is, and sometimes I despair, how do we actually get that message and their methods and that ethos, you know, to sort of like grassroots level within the organisation? How do we get the person on the reception desk, or how do we get the housing officer to actually buy into them principles as well? I mean, I think it's happening. I'm trying to be a bit more optimistic. I think it's happening. I think within the Plus Housing Group, because there's a clear steer coming from, let's say, the centre, you know, that message is slowly permeating throughout the organisation. But nevertheless, I mean, sometimes, you know, I mean, it won't get through, and that won't be because there's not the commitment within the larger organisation. Often that can just be down to the individual who was actually interfacing with, you know, that member of the community or that resident at that point in time. But no, I agree with what you're saying. Basically, you know, that is the real task for, you know, sort of like the organisation to actually make its policies more meaningful to, you know, those people that are actually working at the point of delivery and the people that are receiving them services as well.
Yeah, I think, like Liz was saying before, you know, about you could have like finance officer or somebody, you know, and it's a form of training, you know, and it's like, for myself anyway, again, you know, you can't speak for the whole group, but I'd like to think that I am speaking on behalf of some people, that, you know, for us, it has been a learning curve for ourselves. And also, you know, if you've had like the interaction with your local housing officers, we've actually trained them to a degree. You know, you said about some training. We've actually said, and I have as well, you know, that they've got to change their attitude. You know, like don't forget, we're social housing. So, you know, if you go back X amount of years ago, you never had a voice. You know, you got what you were given, and that's it. So I think there's such a change, really, over, I'd say, the last 15 years. And us as residents, you know, we need to be accountable as well. You know, because we've got the moaners. I'm a moaner, and you know what? You know, at times, every one of us go. If you're offered a silver plate, you want a gold one. You know what I mean? So you all want more and more. But I think the expectations of our residents is really higher. And I think for us to be on that learning curve and the training process, we need to, like, not just knock the housing officers out the way, but to bring them along with us and say, you know, your behaviour is unacceptable to our people, you know, and it's us, we're the ones that can do it, you know, in our own communities. And that in itself, rather than going from the top down to, as you said, from your top part down to the bottom, it can come from the bottom up as well. Right, so if you kickstart on both ends, you might get a decent type of it sounds horrible, decent service. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but you have got some people that they think social housing residents have got rights, and we have, but our own people need to know that they've got rights as well, and I think we've done quite a lot of that, you know, and you all need to be open, you know, really to that as well, you know, and things about that.
Yeah, you know, I agree, definitely. I mean, we as residents have greater opportunity now. I mean, my parents have been in social housing all their life, and they cringe when I say what I've been up to. Well, you can't do that, you can't say this. You know, they think I'm being really cheeky, but like you say,
don't say that.
You know, and then now they're getting, will you just ring this number and ask these, you know, because, but I mean, when we're offered training through TPAS and everything as a resident, I mean, that's of great value. I mean, you're getting to know people, you're getting to know how to approach people, which is, again, is a learning curve. But also you're gaining in confidence as well, and why shouldn't we ask for things? Like you say, we might be a resident, but we're still we're a resident, you know.
I mean, from an organisational point of view, I mean, this thing about attitude, I think that there's a growing awareness that having the right attitude, working as part of an organisation, is actually now being valued as a positive attribute. So whereas previously having the wrong attitude, you know, really wouldn't, you know, raise any, you know, sort of like wouldn't sort of like raise any eyebrows. I think now, because of the growing awareness by people working within, let's say, the Plus Housing Group, of the power of residents, the power of tenants, and the ability of residents and tenants to actually influence the way that we provide services. I think that there's a growing awareness that having the right attitude is actually now seen as a positive attribute, and those people working within the organisation that are not, you know, and that are not able to exhibit the a positive attitude, then often that's you know, that reflects against them. So I think gradually, you know, that positive attitude should begin to permeate through, so that we see more people with a positive approach to tenants and residents, as opposed to the way it may have been in the past.
Can I just bring in Steve? I think we've got some questions from the webcast.
Well, hi Paul. Just a few comments and a couple of questions. First one is, we've got a large online audience, including people from Bristol, Oxford, Amsterdam and Copenhagen.
Oh, very good.
One question from Alan from your earlier conversation with Liz is, isn't 10 years rather a long time for a regeneration programme for the OAPs who live in that area? And another question also from Alan is there a league table of social landlords in the UK? And if not, wouldn't it be a good idea to have one?
Do you want to answer?
Well, I mean, there's quite a lot of pressure to extend the timescales for regeneration programmes. So whereas in the past they've been considered to be too short, I think government responded to that and said, we will lengthen it, we will make it 10 years. And you can see even in Kensington, for example, NDC, it's just entered its 4th year. But actually, there's a long way to go in preparing the ground. If you're really going to talk to the residents in an area about their area and about, you know, what they feel about it and so on, and do that properly, and then work things up, you know, with them, it takes time. And even now, I think, you know, some of those residents in Kensington feel under pressure from, you know, government-imposed deadlines and the rest of it to move things on when perhaps they're not quite ready. So, you know, you've got some conflicts there around, you know, is it too long, is it too short? And I think, you know, the other problem with government initiatives is they do tend to have a lifespan and a cliff face when they stop. And although we talk a lot about good exit strategies and so on, I don't think we've really cracked that one yet. And that's why, really, the government has tried to move away from special initiatives into, we must get the main services working properly in all our neighbourhoods, and therefore putting money into those main services to get them all working better, no matter what the neighbourhood is. So there's a kind of minimum standard being achieved across the piece. Now that's, you know, that's a 20-year strategy. And that's really what it's all about, because you can't do the one-offs like Kensington across all the neighbourhoods that need it.
Can I just add, this is a personal comment here about the age issue too, and I feel very strongly about this, and there's a lot about this in the press and stuff. Our experience has been older people are able to deal with change, and I think it's about providing the care and support to take people through that. It's not about, I think the hat in many ways, we've got lots of people who have not worked with older people, so we haven't put limitations on what they can and cannot do. And, you know, I remember the first tenant spin trip when we were taking some people to New York, and somebody was 83 and there was a real panic about them going to New York to do an exhibition as part of a gallery in New York, and we were like, what's the problem? Because it's been about the experience of regeneration, and I think a lot of older residents and some who won't see their new properties, certainly who have engaged with us, have enjoyed the process. And as long as you've got the care and support needs in place, and we have a very exceptional community support team and lots of care support in place, people can be involved in processes. And that's just my own view.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, it got to come from Liverpool. I mean, you know, elderly people, or whatever the terminology is. I think we're the ones that put everyone on the map, that, you know, you don't just sit in your house, you get out there, you do the dogs, you do all the arty stuff and everything else, you know. And I was 21 when I started with the hat, and I'm 33 now, I think.
And again, I think that's very much the spirit of Olga Bailey as well,
everyone.
who was about get involved, do other things. That's part of
I think we
of the
realised that it was going to be a long programme, because the Liverpool Housing Action Trust was one of the biggest out of the 6 in the country, and we were just like pep potted everywhere, you know, right across Liverpool. But I think the people themselves weren't stupid to realise that was just, you know, either you get your house done or your flat done and you move in the next week. It was about, again, a holistic approach, which was not just about the housing. It was about regeneration, it was about economic development, it was about developing people and the communities. And I think, you know, I know ours go, oh, you know, here she goes again, but a lot of it has been with the Housing Action Trust, their help and our own expertise as well. You know, a lot of our own people as well have, you know, they could have just been sitting at home, not saying all would, but, you know, they've come out and they're part of the community, not hiding behind the door waiting to go into a home, you know.
And that's important.
It's not the age, it's not ageism, you know, and I think Liverpool have started that off.
That's just reminded me of a great story, and it's because Mark Cooper's in the audience. He's the fantastic project manager for Cosmopolitan, who has managed to get Olive Mount on site this week, so it's very exciting. But he was telling us the other day that we had an open day for trainees for the scheme, and one of the residents, who was 72 or something from Olive Mount, had all this experience on building sites, might be being employed on the site, which is pretty amazing, really. And that attitude that resident will bring to time commitments and things will rub off on younger people, the work ethic, and it's just a great story. That person thought they were retiring, now they're building their own property. Sorry, Steve, is there any more questions, or no more questions? Anything from the audience?
Can't see you.
Hello, Jack.
It's a bit like that, Jack. We got a question at the back.
1 minute.
Can we get a mic?
Should the responsibility for deliberative participation be of specific DP officers, or should it be a generic function for all housing officers to deliver on?
If I just...
Sorry. The question was effectively the responsibility for getting obviously the community and the tenants involved. Should that be of specific tenant participation officers? Or should it be a generic function, effectively, of all officers within that landlord to ensure that that actually happens?
I actually could go back to the point that I was saying to Karl earlier on. I think, you know, the housing officers themselves have a role to play, and as Karl has said, they are starting to do that role, and, you know, have been in the past and will go on in the future. So, you know, it's not about taking away a tenant participation officer. It's about getting everybody involved and participating as best they could in their field. So I think,
And just to add to, I mean, just to add to that, I mean, this has been a bit of a bugbear of mine over the years, because, you know, I sort of like constantly been lobbying my organisation to actually take on board that principle. I think it's, you know, I mean, it's a must. It's got to be integral to the work of everybody else within the organisation. The danger is, and, you know, it's happened to me in the past, and there's a danger of somebody like me becoming this sort of like so-called expert in tenant participation. You know, issues come up, and I happen to be the only person that can actually deal with them issues. If I'm not able to deal with them, then the issues don't get dealt with. So, I mean, I've been lobbying, you know, my organisation, I used to work for the Health Authority, to actually take on board that principle, so that tenant participation, community engagement, community involvement, it's an integral part of everybody's job description. And you know, for me, that's the only way that you're really going to get true ownership of, you know, a very diverse range of issues that people are faced with, providing services to people in communities.
Anyone want to add anything to that?
I think that's fine as long as there is somebody who pulls it together and is actually answerable for what is happening on tenant participation. And really that should be the chief executive of an organisation, but probably they do need a bit of support from time to time. So I think there's a typical civil service answer really. There's a role here for everybody, isn't there? I think it has to permeate throughout the organisation, but I think there's no substitute for actually having somebody that reminds everybody and updates them and updates their skills and so on all the time.
Okay, well I think that's the end of the first discussion. We've got a half an hour break now, and then the next discussion is about actually looking at some housing estates where maybe they're wanting regeneration to happen quicker, and actually some of the bigger picture, is it as relevant? We wanted actually somebody from the boot estate to come, but we were unable to get them. But actually, if you're living in a house that has sort of major repair problems, is some of this a bit too fanciful? So that's the next discussion. It'll start at 1:15. For those of you not in the fact centre, I'm sorry, but we've got food coming in now. We can't put that down the internet. But thank you very much, panel.